Hey, welcome everybody to our Next Gen Breakthrough Producers panel here at HollyShorts. I'm Eddie Kotek, I'm the editor-in-chief of Young Cinema magazine. I think there were some copies earlier in the week. If there aren't, feel free to hit me up and give me your address and I'll send them out to you. But it's an official publication of all the major film festivals and film markets around the world. And I produce mainly on the documentary side of it. So I think it's going to be a pretty cool panel because between everyone up here, the level of experience and the level of types of projects that are kind of coming through from this group up here is really kind of covering a broad spectrum. I'm going to loosely, because we're such a small group, I want to kind of keep this informal as well. So if you have a question as we go, feel free just to shoot your hand up and get the information that you want. I feel like when it is a kind of tight group, really we just want you to have the best benefit that you can have from this panel. So if you have questions that you're dying to ask about things that you're working on or want to be working on, then just shoot your hand up and we'll get around to talking about what everyone is here to learn about. What's kind of the break here between, we've got directors in the audience, or producers, directors? Yeah, and producers? Okay, cool, good balance. So I'll start, writers, do we have writers? A couple of writers, yeah. So I'll quickly introduce everybody. To the right, starting with Matt Ratner. Matt has had a pretty cool couple of years. Like his most recent couple of years, his new company is called Tilted Windmill. So Tilted Windmill Productions, and I remember in the Hollywood Reporter they were talking about a new film that you had in production, I guess recently, which was Match with Patrick Stewart and Carla Gugino, and Lillard as well. And then there was another film that you had also that also just recently wrapped. Yeah.
In Sicily.
In Sicily. Oh wow. So feel free to talk to Matt obviously about the hiring process and how you get the sort of stellar cast on board. It's for a new production company that was just started a couple of years ago. And also about shooting overseas, I guess would be a good one. Mark Scholar to his left. Mark was on panel here a couple of years ago. And also has had a pretty busy couple of years. He had a film at the LA Film Festival this year. And had a film called Pig that was doing the festival circuit pretty vehemently a couple of years ago as well. But Mark, I guess, is most known to, at least me, by being the founder of the No Budget Film School. So whereas we've got representatives here from Northwestern, USC, and some of the kind of Brown universities and other kind of good schools, you might want to ask them about the No Budget Film School to see whether maybe film school is worth it or not worth it. Any of the above. To his left is Adam Leibowitz. Adam's a producer and he works a lot with his brother, right? From Western Nolan. They've been writing and producing their film with Lawrence Fishburne a couple of years ago called Tortured out of Wednesday. Addison. And it's also the founder of this thing called the Quick Film Budget, which is a piece of software that can customize a budget for you fairly quickly, which I know for most of you is a complete pain in the ass. So you might want to talk to him about that and how he kind of came up with that concept and how you might be able to get a hold of it and use it. To his left, we have Clay Westervelt. I was going to say Westervelt, just about to get all German on him or something. But Clay has an interesting history. He was kind of an award-winning cinematographer at USC. He's worked a lot in the reality space as well as on documentary projects. And then was shooting a bunch of conversations with the SAG Foundation, doing some other things online that you might find interesting. But is producing, directing, has multiple projects going all over the place. So also a really good resource to have here on the panel. Sarah is working down in Santa Monica, has a company that focuses a lot right on music video and commercial producers making their leap into feature filmmaking. How long has that been going on?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, okay. the company's called Sunnyfield Entertainment. She's also had projects and been working on projects in creative development at Paramount, Lionsgate, some other independent film and television outlets. She has a project on her plate, which they have Hathaway attached to it. Another is an adaptation of a online video game called Dead Island. So feel free to talk to her about where you started and where you might be going to. And has also got experience in the commercial and music video space. Worked a lot with some big producers, Hype Williams, and worked on videos with like Cool J, and Jay-Z, and Snoop, and all those kind of cats, as well as No Doubt. And before that, worked in commercial production as well with directors like David LaChapelle. And is now working at a company called 34th Street Entertainment, which is a subsidiary of Tyler Perry's huge organisation out in Atlanta. Are you out? Little Tyler Perry. Are you in Atlanta or are you out here? You're out here. So feel free to ask her about beginnings, middles, and endings. Certainly 34th Street and projects that Amber's been working on have also been making their way through the ranks, and films like We the Peoples came out recently. It's a project that she worked on, and I think had a hand in kind of bringing Tyler's attention to Precious, because Tyler was one of the presenting producers after Precious won Sundance, along with Oprah Winfrey and some other people. And obviously that film did just okay. So we've got a lot of talent up here, a lot of experience. So really what I will first ask you, I guess, is, okay, so beginnings. Film school, cinematography, film school producing, film school, no budget film school, Mark, what made you want to be a producer? Is it the directing route, deciding to get your own projects done, or did you just, this is what you want to do, this is what you went to school for?
That's because of a pathological level.
We'll go on the panel. Just go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of all roads lead to Rome, right? And so I don't think there's a right choice. Film school's right for some people. There's no replacement for on-set experience. There's no replacement for just watching other people make mistakes and learning from them, so you get to make different mistakes. I think it really depends, where you are. I don't think in today's climate you need to go to film school because you need the piece of paper. I think it's about how do you create opportunities for yourself. And then if you're nice and competent, that's a all too rare combination in this field sometimes. And if you're nice, competent, and work hard, you will go places.
I think that the question was how I started. I'm probably like a lot of you. I started out as a filmmaker, wanted to make films, but have this kind of like disease of DIY, do-it-yourself. And when I was in school, I wasn't a film major, but I went to a school that had a really good film program, and I was majoring in business, and I snuck into that film program and made films and shot them and edited them and did all that stuff myself. And when I came out here, before this movie were born, it was to be a filmmaker, but it was to follow the steps of like Clerks and El Mariachi and these films from Texas that were made for $30,000, which was money that I had saved up at that point. And so I've always kind of been in that like, I can do this myself. Why do I need to go and raise a lot of money? And years and years later, now realizing I need to go and raise money, but at the same time, I think there's a big value in not messing around for years trying to be a filmmaker by raising money when there are so many ways now, easy, I say, to make film without money that can be a really good film and help launch your career. It won't make you money, those films that I teach you to make for no money. You will not make money on those films, but they are a great way to get you to the next step of sort of paying to allow you to make a movie.
So my background was a little bit different. My undergraduate, I studied finance at Wharton, and then I immediately went into USC's Computer Smart Producing program. And I think I got more out of that than any other student possibly. I got their grants of like 50 grand to go and make a short film. I was signed as a client by one of my professors, who was an agent, and then she packaged my first major film. But in hindsight, like I said, I got more out of it than I think anybody else. But it's also, nobody will ever ask me what my grades were. I actually don't think I did well in that teacher's class who signed me as a client. I probably had like a B. And, but she saw that I was nice and confident. And it related into a career as a film producer, which is what I always wanted to do.
I went to grad school at USC as well and had no interest in producing whatsoever. And I think that was probably one of the, I think they've changed the program there a bit now, but that was one of the negatives coming out of school is I don't think we were very well trained in what it meant to be a producer. They have two different programs there at USC. There's the production program and then there's the Start Producers program. And while I was there, the head of physical production was not a fan of the Start Producers program. And that, unfortunately, I think that colored a lot of our experiences. And it wasn't until I just sort of had it in my head that a director is the one who does all the work on the film, that they're making all the decisions, they're doing all the work, and the producer just has to, get the money or whatever. And there's not, and while that's part of it, it wasn't until years later when I started, by happenstance, I had my own production company, started producing for other folks that I realized what it really takes to be a good producer. And now I love it. Like, we just finished a documentary that we did completely on our own, but then HBO bought it and it's showing there now. And in that experience, I was a cinematographer and producer on the film, and then working with my friend who was directing it. I keep likening it to where directing is maybe more of a fatherly energy, where you're saying, this is what I want, this is what I need, but I think of producing as more of a motherly energy, where you're nurturing and trying to help this project come to life in the way that is best suited for it, and so you're taking care of everybody. And that can be exhausting, but it can also be really invigorating, because you're really the one who shepherds that project for years and years. And I love it now.
I didn't go to film school, I didn't go to grad school. I came out here right after I finished my undergrad and started working for Jacobson when she first launched her production company long before the Hunger Games. But I think, one thing that I learned from Nina was that at the end of the day, no matter what sort of producer you are, no matter what the size or shape or form of the film that you're working on, it's really all about story, and as much as it can be all about all of the other things as well, it's sort of all about story first. And that was sort of a takeaway that really led me towards sort of sticking with the path towards becoming a producer myself. I think it's sort of continuously inspiring and fun and challenging and sort of all about the writer and the work. And from that point, I moved more through the studio system and worked at Paramount for a long time. And in sort of moving over to the production company that I'm currently running and looking at sort of the company itself is sort of built with an eye towards leveraging a whole group of post-production companies with different assets in post as a sort of partial equity component in making a film. And, there are many different models with which you can launch a production company. There are, I think now more than ever, so many different roads to getting a movie made that I think, the combination of sort of where I started from a very traditional set of companies into a more non-traditional approach to making movies feels fluid and exciting and sort of where the business is headed. So that was sort of my takeaway and where I am.
Can you hear me? Well, I did not go to film school. I went to USC and I actually majored in journalism and public relations, which at film school did look pretty good at USC. It was, pretty fancy, but had no interest, actually didn't really know that film made me for me. So I just interned a lot during school, and it was music video companies, record labels, television, and just kind of felt my way. And they never talk about these jobs. I mean, the above the line is, that's what we see Oscar time, writer, director, producer. But then there's development, then there's, just the worker bee, there's finance, as well, that are all components of putting a film together. So it was a great exploration just in those internships and coming out of school, through music videos, being able to see it on a smaller scale, a production of 50 people rather than 200, you really, I got to create an intimate experience and relationship with the directors, with the DPs, and knowing what they did and the roles of everybody on set. I think now, film is a bit more democratized, I think, with technology, that if the debate is going to film school and spending $100,000, $120,000, or just trying it on your own, I think that's up to your skill set, your personality, what your strengths are. College is great, but I don't think it's for everybody. There's a critical analysis, I think, that happens in academia, but can you get that outside of the institution? And with Vine, with Instagram video, with Vimeo, with YouTube, now the distribution channels have changed. So all you need is a camera, and even those now have gone down in price. So you can try things out even with your iPhone, that you don't have to spend the money to go to USC or to Columbia or NYC, but you can try by yourself just through trial and error. And with the element of storytelling, which is very important, which I believe in as well, is just character and story being the heart of every project. In 6 seconds, challenging yourself. How can you tell the story, beginning, middle, and an end? And there are some great filmmakers on Vine. There's one, King Bach, that I'm a huge fan of. In 6 seconds can do flips, can tell a joke, can do something compelling or poignant. And those are the ones that are being discovered now. Actually, there was a guy yesterday, I don't know if you guys have heard of Todd Hall. He's a YouTube director, had a huge debut yesterday. He's released about a dozen short films. Yesterday, he did one called Cinderance, which is Cinderella story set to Beyonce music, and it's actually pretty incredible. And from those videos, he was signed by UTA.
Sharknado, Cinderance, it's going back to that Jennifer and Brangelina kind of thing. It's perpetrated all the way through the film titles and fortunately or unfortunately commercialization. Clay talked about the mother-father relationship of producer-director. You're talking about finding your storytellers from the short form format. What do you look for when beginning a relationship with either a new or an established director? What do you look for from them? Is it that passion? Is it, do you want to see a whole bunch of materials and lookbooks and iPad demonstrations and clips and teasers? Or do you just go with your gut and what can you see from them in these kind of short formats, do you think? And then more specifically for you guys down there, Matt, in the long format, how do you choose a director for your projects? What do you look for? Because obviously it's a huge thing for a director to book a project, especially a feature film now. So are you looking for someone you can control or someone who'll take the help?
I think for the both of us coming from music video and commercial production, the music video directors are known for their aesthetic and beautiful shot, fisheye lens, especially with height. And going to the long form, it's how can you tell a 3-act structure? So I look for, number one, just having knowledge of story, almost from a writer's perspective. And it's not just how you're going to shoot it, but what the character's motivations are, what's the theme of the story, what you want your audience to get out of it. And then growing from there. The aesthetic, I think, depends on genre. If it's, sci-fi or hyper stylized action, then I will look for that. But at the very core of it, I want to know what you think about pacing. I want to know, just how you make correct the script. What's your director's draft and your take on the story, more so than just your camera angles.
Yeah, I think actually this festival is really relevant in terms of what I tend to look for in filmmakers. I think the sort of equal opportunity of the internet right now is super exciting, and it's not to be ignored that people are doing videos on YouTube all the time and getting signed by major agencies. Like, those guys really, can take a shot. I think for me personally, the company that I work at, we often will develop visual materials alongside a narrative screenplay. So working closely with writer directors, with filmmakers who have a good sense of story and who can think both in short form and in long form, potentially even shooting a teaser or building a trailer with an eye towards sort of building a brand for a larger narrative. I think being able to sort of think in both categories and sort of, speak to themes, speak to narrative, but also very technically understand how you execute and how you can, at least for me, execute for a price, with an eye towards sort of practical budgets and practical concerns. The sort of combination is appealing. But in terms of visual materials themselves, it's an instinct. Sometimes having the iPad presentation and the trailer and the sizzle and all that stuff already done and handed to you can blow you away and just convince you of a movie and make you fight for something. But oftentimes, even just having one of those pieces or coming to someone with a treatment and a clean, simple idea that sort of speaks to a world that's exciting and feels fresh, it's enough. You want to sort of leave your producer with enough room to sort of engage and help you build. So I don't think you need to worry about sort of bringing everything to the table so much as bringing a strong, clean, simple idea that really has the potential to grow.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. An understanding of story is absolutely paramount, I think. I'll work as a director, as a cinematographer, as a producer at different times, and that's always the top on my list, is I want to be able to work with someone who, having a vision, yes, but if they can't communicate that vision in terms of story, everything starts to fall apart. So if I'm shooting and I'm working with a director, then I'll always have my idea. I'll always bring something to the table with me. And if it's different than what that director is picturing, that's great too, but we need to end up agreeing somewhere along the line. I definitely believe that no matter how much I like my ideas, whether I'm the producer or anybody else there, I definitely believe that you end up with the strongest final product if you're following one creative vision. And the way that you communicate that creative vision is by discussing in terms of story. So something as simple as a shot. You're saying, the director says, well, I want it to crane up this way, and the cinematographer says, yeah, but then that's not right because it's too open, and he says, but I don't like what you're doing because if you do keep it too low, then it's not momentous enough. And they come together and say, okay, we both have points, so then we need to shift it over this way so that we have a greater background and we're accomplishing the same thing. But that's a story discussion, even in terms of one shot. And I'm big on communication, so that's always going to be my answer.
So I think that it depends on a lot of different factors, particularly the level of budget you're looking at. If you're looking at making a studio film versus making an independent film, and even as an independent film, it has to be treated differently. And I speak from my perspective as a producer and also from the budget of how I see other filmmakers going about it. So working at a studio or producing films for a studio, you look for two things in a director. And it's very crude and blunt, but they're the only two paths to actually making a movie at that level. One is, can that director get you talent, which will get you financing, or can this director get you financing, meaning like through foreign sales? And the only way to measure that is by going to boxofficemojo.com, looking at the director's last films and how much they made in each territory around the world. So then we go into a different category of films, which is independent filmmaking, where you're dealing with smaller budgets, and it's how much can this director actually pull off in his creative vision. Do you actually believe that he works well with actors and actresses? And do you think that he can actually execute his vision in a way that's both commercial and truly entertaining? And so you always want to make sure that he or she's not biting off more than he can chew. That was one of the takeaways that I learned in making short films, is that directors wanted to make each short film like their they're Gone with the Wind. They're an epic film on a budget of $1. And at the end of the day, the film just suffers because you have one gigantically sweeping shot, and then you have a lot of other small shots that don't really make a narrative, and the film as a whole suffers. So that's how I approach selecting a filmmaker and what I look for them, what I look for in them.
Well, when you got the mic, what was the benefit and detriment of working with your brother?
Thanks, good.
The detriment was, I would say, a greater fear of letting us down. Me, and also, whereas when you're working with someone who's not your brother, which I have, and it was not as good of an experience. You can probably just look at my IMDb filmography and just see who that is. And I didn't actually know who this person was. Even though I had been through pre-production, he had picked me for my reputation for working well with young directors. And I knew myself that I learned so much about somebody when you go when you make a movie with them, and they become your family. And I would say making that movie inspired me to even more want to work with my brother.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody mentioned performances, because in the world of the films that I make, that's like the story and performances are like equal in talent, directing, and writing talent. I've been working primarily or exclusively making films that I would call festival films, the kind of films that you could try to get into a Sundance, as opposed to being necessarily commercial. You want them to be, at the end of the day, commercial, but if you start out making a commercial film on this kind of mid level, small budget, whatever, it's probably not going to get into the Sundance. So it's a different kind of equation. So I've worked with pretty much the same directors. Almost every film I've worked with in 4 films now. And I used to work at a company that was owned by the Independent Film Channel that gave finishing funds, and we were giving finishing funds to very small budget films. It just came to us over the transom, and that included Chris Nolan's first film, Joe Carnahan's first film, and some other filmmakers that you probably heard of. And that was what we were looking for, where it had nothing to do with production value and some kind of commercial reality. It was this unique, it was something we hadn't seen before, and how good were the performances. It was shot well, that's great, but that wasn't necessarily that important, or what it was shot on, and a lot of that kind of stuff. So since that time, and I met the director that I work with now, through that experience, he directed a film that they maybe spent $3,000 on over the course of 2 or 3 years. They never had $3,000 at one time. It was shot with a 2-man crew. The director and the cinematographer had 2 cameras. That was the entire crew. The only other people on the set were actors. It was 100% improvised, and they got a dramatic competition in 2001 at Sundance. And it was all acting. That's all there was acting, and again, this kind of idea of what might be called story, even though there wasn't real traditional narrative in that film. And so when I look at a script, it's with that eye of like, is this something we haven't seen before? Is it unique? And then it would always be like, who are we going to get to play these parts, and who can handle these people as actors? And I know how my director works. He's an actor himself. He started out as an actor, and he's very good with actors. And we're not going to necessarily get like famous people for our films. We're not necessarily going to get people that are known to be great actors because they've been in a bunch of other stuff. So in the casting process, which is something that I work very closely with the director, we're really trying to see who we can get that's going to be great, and then have the time when you're shooting to take with actors. So it's not trying to put together 15-day shoots for films. Although our last film, this one that was at the LA Film Festival, was an 18-day shoot, which was something new for us and very difficult. And we're proud of what we were able to pull off. But and I don't think he would have been able to do that if it wasn't his film. So at the level that it came out. So anyway, that would be kind of my things. kind of looking at performance. So that's why I'd be worried about someone who's mainly a music video director is how well, I mean, obviously they can do the shots and all this kind of stuff, but depending on the kind of movie you're making, if you were making the kind of movies that I was probably looking at, those shots aren't, going to be nearly as important probably as the performances.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, case by case in different projects, there are different things that are sort of rise to the top of the various tools you want in your director's toolbox. I do think one of the sort of common things you're hearing is probably isn't news, but content release team. You can fix a lot of stuff, but you can't fix, is this a story worth telling? Is a story that, whether it's a 10-minute story or a 2-hour story, people are going to want to sit in their seats and watch. And so certainly, I think in the indie space, the writer-director is very common and probably dominant. And part of that is because obviously there's a handle on the story there. And then when you talk about attracting talent, that's it. Movies that we're able to make now because of changing marketplace, DSLR is sort of changing technological capacity to make films for a variety of reasons. Really great, talented, wonderful actors are attracted to projects, and more importantly, their agents are letting them do projects they wouldn't have done 10, 15 years ago. So whether that's via the content with the writer-director, or via a director being able to establish that relationship and that trust with an actor, that certainly is a really important skill. And then I think producing movies is it's not a low stress environment, right? And so you really want to think about, is this somebody that I want to be in the foxhole with? If I'm taking the movie from prep through delivery, God willing, then this is a relationship that is going to be a 2-year relationship. And Murphy's Law, in the short term, and Murphy's Law tends to sort of intrude on you when you least expect it. And it needs to be someone where, yes, you challenge each other. And what you're saying, play sort of the shots. And to me, that's, none of us are painters. None of us are in individual mediums. Filmmaking is supposed to be collaborative. That's why it's fun. If I'm not a better lighting designer than my gaffer, well, guess what? I hired the wrong gaffer. You should surround yourself with people who are better than you, and be smart enough to know what you don't know. That's where the charge comes. That's where for all the long days, for all the it's going to get off the ground. Oh no, it's not. Well, yes, it is. Or no, it's not. Oh, we're running. However much over. All of that. What's worth it is that kind of that energy and that excitement that comes from working with really creative people to tell a story. And so it's in that director-producer relationship. I think it's someone where you believe that you'll challenge each other, you'll support each other, and ultimately, what you come out with at the end of the process is something that's much better for it.
Were both your directors on your recent project, were they also writers?
Yes.
Yeah, I would just say, you make a really good point about this, like when you're in the shit and play at this point of we're running out of time, what are we going to do? I think as a producer, this idea of understanding, what the story is, you have to step back and know what really makes this film work. So that when it does get down to we're not going to make our day, we have to cut something, or we're going to only have a little bit of time for some of this and maybe more time for this. You have to know we have to get this. This is really important. This makes our whole film.
The sunset, you get the 2 shots.
We can't get 2 shots. We need 2 shots exactly. So I think that the director can make that call, but you have to understand that deeply and agree with the director and step back from it. The director's in the weeds and the nitty gritty, and they're forgetting things, and you're the one that's back here going, no. Remember we talked about this is super important, and this one, we just get that shot and we're okay. But this is we have to spend our time and make sure it's great because it's going to make the whole movie tick. That's something that you have to understand. That kind of story level, I think it kind of defines what that means of understanding the story.
And since the theme of our week, with the HollyShorts, as you're thinking about your shorts and your next project, think about what you want that calling card to be, because there are hundreds of shorts out there. There are probably thousands of shorts that are circulating through the film festivals. If you are going to do drama, think about what type of drama. Is there a twist? Is it, a usual suspects? Is it, something just very dark and has a different lighting, lighting perspective? Think about what is going to stand out from the crowd. And usually comedies, something visually, VFX heavy. There's a lot of filmmakers from South America right now that are doing crazy things on, $2 budgets. And there was a film, Monsters, I think that Gareth Edwards did for $100,000 and had big alien octopus monsters at the end. And now he's taking off. So think about, but that was a feature film, but think about in 20 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, what are you going to do that stands out from the pack, that's going to get you seen? And I will be completely honest, full disclosure, in my personal taste, sometimes coming of age, I've seen a lot of them. Seen a lot of coming of age, a girl goes through something, a boy goes through something. Great, but again, what is the different perspective? How are you going to tell that story from a different angle?
Just add something to that, which I think is a really good point. You're not just going to make one short. It doesn't have to be your sort of magnum opus. It doesn't have to be your Gone with the Wind. You don't have to say everything that you have to say as a filmmaker in the first short that you put out there, or in the short that you try and just to get signed, or in the short that you want to make your first feature from. It's like, it's more powerful for sort of people like us who will be watching your material if you key in on the one thing you want to say. What you're really trying to communicate in the short is suspense, or it's the arc of a relationship, or it's, a horrific circumstance, or it's something sort of like raucous and comedic, kind of starts to laugh. Like, pick your poison and stick with it, because you only have a couple of minutes in a short film, and the strongest impression you can make is a clear impression, and doing something like that well and sort of owning your choice will sort of bring you your next opportunity to continue to grow and to sort of continue to extend your voice.
I mean, I got a very good piece of advice, which I can't correctly attribute because I have the memory of a goldfish, but which was a number of years ago. Someone told me, you don't, and it's great to be ambitious. It's great to want to do great things and all of that, but someone told me basically, you don't have to win an Oscar with your first film. You have to get to direct the second film, and that's it. And I think people who feel, what you can control. There's so much of this business that is serendipity, and worry about what you can control. And what you can control is making the best damn film that you can. And what comes of that will come of that. But you can hold your head high and feel really good about the work and the blood and the sweat and the tears that you poured into it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, so many people feel pressured by festival deadlines as well, and they're like, crap, like Sundance deadline's coming up, and they don't even know what kind of film they have yet. But they're like, let's rush it out there and get it in front of it. Otherwise, get a later cut later. But there's no second.
You get it right.
I thought I saw a question there in the middle. Yeah.
I had a question. I'm in a position where I'm basically talking to producers right now to try to build a producing team. And I was wondering if you guys could speak to kind of that idea of the team, of like if you work with other producers, and do you want to bring your own co-producers on, or do you want sort of the director to try to pull the team together? Just how does that work? How do the different, because you see these films and they have 5 producers on them. How do all those people work together? How does that
You're saying from the perspective of you're a filmmaker or you're a producer?
I'm a filmmaker, and right now we're talking to different producers, and kind of somebody will say us, well, I know how to, I can get this, I have the relationship with the markets.
So the question is, how do you put your team of producers?
Yeah, exactly.
But you have a specific project that you're
That's right.
for.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in this current environment, most producers are, not one-stop shops anymore, and so they are doing things together. And then Matt, you're working with a guy I know pretty well, Rick Rosenthal, over at Whitewater Films, who's been involved in all sorts of things. So how did that, for you, how that relationship come about, and what's the kind of distribution of duties between you? Is one finance, one's on, one's on the game?
Rick's a great example, and he's been at it for a long time. He directed Bad Boys with Sean Penn back when none of us were particularly around. And and other people alluded to it, you talked about it with your brother, where there's a reason you see people work consistently, whether it's a director as a cinematographer they like, or you have a producing partner you like. You find people where that rhythm is good, and you want to keep working with them. And so Rick and I actually didn't know each other before we started working on this film, and now we'll work together on subsequent films. We've got subsequent films we're working on, and that rhythm just became very easy in terms of the delineation of duties. But it wasn't something that was sort of pre-hatched, okay, you're going to really be the post-super on this, and it was something that kind of developed organically.
So as you proceeded through the project, you divided up certain things depending on who acted.
Sure. And when I was off in Italy, was shouldering more of the burden. Guy named David Permit, who's a real baby. This project was. Project was based on a play a Broadway run about 10 years ago, and David was another guy who he got to start selling star maps, and he's just a guy who loves making movies, and he's been doing this for 35 years or 40 years or whatever. So I did the play, and make a fucking good movie. Let's go make a movie. You can probably tap that. And it sort of developed from there. And then the three of us, David was up in Vancouver shooting a TV movie. Rick stepped up. Rick was shooting something in Seattle. I stepped up. And it was never, I think what made it work, the only way it can work, is when it's not feeling like anyone is doing more than their share. And there's a feeling that, that everybody's really, on the same team and in it together.
Sarah, do you want to weigh in on this? Given your experiences with Nina for one, and then your own experiences.
Well, actually, it's interesting. So in my current job, certainly the bulk of the job is sort of producing things very much from the ground up, and certainly partnering with other producers as a part of that process. And the flip side of that is, as somebody who's affiliated with a whole group of post-production companies, oftentimes things actually come to us as things to consider as producers fairly late in the game. So while half of my job is sort of being maybe the first producer on a project and then finding or sourcing the right strategic partners, whether it be another producer who has more finance or specialty, or someone who can attract talent, or it's a studio. The flip side of that is oftentimes sort of coming on board late in the game and providing post-equity and coming on board as a producer because of that post-equity piece, and acting almost more as a financier, as a last producer, and to get a movie made. So I sort of see it sometimes from sort of both perspectives. And I think in answer to your question, the team is immeasurably important, and it doesn't, as long as people have a track record of working together, or there's a real collaboration there, whether you have 2 or 5 producers, it's all about getting the movie made and sort of finding the smartest, most resourceful pathway from A to B. But if you look at people that have different skill sets, some people are better adept with finance, some people are better adept with cost, some people are better adept with story, some people, in terms of the sort of practical locations and planning on the ground, and it's really what your movie most needs at the time that you're looking for something to add to the pie. I love collaborating with other producers, and most of the projects that I'm working on have at least one partner. I think it works when you feel that the work share is equally balanced, not all the time, but sort of overall, and that everyone that you've added to the team is bringing something to the table that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And that pipeline is completely different from basically every single project. But producers, I think, more than ever, are very comfortable working with each other and sort of carving out these sorts of relationships, because you can't, the pathway to making a movie just isn't as one-stop shop as it used to be.
And that kind of diversity of skill sets between each.
Yeah, and even producers like Nina, really, big recognized studio producers are more and more open to partnering. And if you're a young producer and you have a great piece of content, you can bring it to those guys, and they will, some more than others, but more than ever before, they'll be willing to partner with you, because the access to content is king. And if you come to them with a great story or an amazing short and a really strong pitch for a feature film, there's not that much original material that's floating around between the big 5 agencies. And if you provide it and you go to one of those producers, the sort of rumors of people screwing you over, it's more likely than not true. more often than not, people are really excited about original narrative and will partner up to see it get made.
Are there any documentary filmmakers here as well? So I'll just quickly say on the documentary front, it becomes what are you lacking? You might have a good grasp of the story, you might know where you want the documentary to go, and the footage that you shoot might fall nicely into that. But if you're lacking skills as an editor, especially in documentary filmmaking, the editing is so important, and you know that you don't have that skill set, you might go out of your way to make that person a producer on the project so that A, they might discount their services if they're really good, or B, they feel so passionately about the project that they become part of that team, and so everyone's kind of pitching in a different skill set. And it is that thing, these guys are talking about people who are stepping up and having that feeling of equality, but remember what you need from them. If someone has the ability to raise financing in a day, while someone else has been on the ground for a year helping you put all the other pieces together, it's still equal because you wouldn't be able to do all those things you're doing on the ground without that person who raised that financing in a day. The fact that their physical effort may be hard to recognize, it's obviously years of relationships that person built up that's enabled them to get to that point to do that. So, don't strictly look for kind of guts and determination and sweat equity. The balance is something that people can recognize and in different ways. There was another quick, sorry, did you want to add something?
I was just going to add, I like what you're saying a lot, and I think and there were two different ways I was hearing your question. I wasn't sure which way it was going, but that is, when you see all that list of how many producers and co-producers and everything are on a project, it can come about in a number of ways. Everything that everybody's saying here is absolutely right on money. Of like, whoever is going to be on your team, they have to have a reason for being there. They have to have something very specific. And if you're giving an editor, offering an editor a producer or co-producer credit, then you have to treat them that way, I think, accordingly. And that means anybody else that's coming on the team in any producer role, you want to make the rest of the team aware of why they're there. Make sure everyone is aware of what everybody else's contribution both is expected and that helps them deliver as well. But there's other producer titles such as like line producer or I don't know if that's what you're talking about. You're probably not trying to assemble those. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about the creative side, like producers, direct producers. So that's what we're trying to build that team right now. So just trying to navigate that space.
You need first and foremost, you need someone who's gonna fight for you and break walls for you, and like that's sort of the first person you need. The person that's gonna it's gonna be by your side, like gets your vision, is gonna be your champion. And once you have that person, it then becomes sort of their job to either solicit, if they're not a big name themselves, the sort of big name that helps to brand your project, or the money that means you don't need a bigger brand, or there are many different ways that you then slice that. But you definitely you need a champion because being a producer is an outgoing business.
And part of the reason that this is coming up is because every producer now has 10 projects, especially in the independent space, because they don't know what's going to happen. So they're very reluctant to commit unless they know there's a team, because they don't know what their schedule is going to be like over the course of the next 3 years. So that's kind of why this is.
It's tough. It's sort of the active schedule plates, right? And I do think exactly what you mentioned is why you need to have at least someone who's there for the long haul. And it's something you do, and especially in the indie space where someone's in it more working on the Audi commercial for a week than they're making on the indie feature. So people don't stay on for the entire life of these projects. And so you need to have someone, whoever it is, there needs to be someone who's going to be there soup to nuts. Because otherwise you'll just miss stuff. Not by I thought you were doing this, I thought you were doing this. Oh, guess what? We're not getting our SANCOM back, or whatever it is. So it is, I think, important, and I think having, there's a comfort in knowing that this is something where it might not be able to be my first priority until it is. But while it's not my first priority, I know that someone is there and is on it. That does give me more confidence in that team and in wanting to be a part of that team.
Amber, do you want to weigh in on this? I know, you're doing development and building business as well for when Russell Simmons and Stan Lathan were working together. Was there something that you saw between them that made them good partners in that business? Or Tyler coming on board as just a presenting producer or refresher?
Well, I think in the director-producer relationship with Russell and Stan, with Imagine, with Fraser and Howard, with State Street, George Tillman, and Bob Title, one does not want to be the other. And so it's clearly defined that the producer wants to produce, the director wants to direct. Because once that gray area comes in and you're trying to do everybody else's job, that becomes a disaster. So everybody has to stick to their lane. With Tyler, it's a little bit different. We are open to co-productions, and our biggest challenge as 34th Street, we are charged to extend the brand into the mainstream, Tyler's brand into the mainstream. So when we look at co-productions, it's what does the other party bring to the table that will help us in that journey. So we may not necessarily partner with a producer that has a similar brand as Tyler because we can do it by ourselves. But if Frazier did come to us and say, hey, I want to do Rush, Tyler Perry, alrighty. Absolutely, sure, because that's a world that we are not in. And so it's about the strategy and diversifying the portfolio of producers and what they're going to bring to the table. And every producer is, all of the successful producers are known for that thing. They are a creative producer, they are a talent producer, they are a finance producer, and having that personal brand for each producer really does help in the long run. And even as they're building their careers, think about that person that you want to be, because sometimes, and I see it with some of my friends, at one point they're a creative producer, but then now they want to be a stylist, and then they're going to edit as well. I'm not really sure what their passion is. And so as soon as you get good at one thing, or you realize that's where you feel passionately, stick to that and create your brand based off of that. Then once you're established, then you can go and do everything else. But be aware, and I hate saying it, but be aware of what other people, how they may perceive you as well. Yes, we shouldn't be mindful of what others have to say, but unfortunately this business can be very fickle, and people will call and say, hey, have you worked with so-and-so producer, and will want to get that background. And that's what you should do as well. If you, as those producers are coming up, look at their credits, see who else was on the film, and make those calls and get those recommendations and referrals.
Cool, there was a question just in front of you.
Maybe even just for the sake of inspiration, could you all share how the projects that you have decided to work on have come to you, and the reasons that you might have chosen? Well, actually more, how do they come to you, and the decision to take them, and then maybe some unconventional ways that projects have come to you and decided to move forward.
Okay, so let's talk about the unconventional side for a second. So in terms of projects that have come to you in a way that is not straightforward, not just a script sent to you by an agent, how have people won your attention by being creative?
I can definitely speak to that. A project that I currently have set up with the micro-budget division at Paramount came to me out of a general meeting. A writer who I wanted to work with for a long time, whose stuff I'd been a fan of, but had been known much more for big, bombastic studio movies, the type of movies I'm not making. I sat down with him, and after having sort of a long meeting and getting to know sort of more what he was looking to do and how he was looking to challenge himself, he heard about the sort of more non-traditional approach that I was looking to take, and sort of, pulled out his iPhone and showed me this really random, not very good, sort of weirdly cut together iMovie that was not a presentation piece of material at all. It was something that he had been messing around with himself, sort of inspiration for a story idea. But there was a core idea in it that was really cool. And we just started talking about that idea pretty organically, and from that came, I took that small sort of iMovie, the sort of 3-minute piece, and I took that to an editor within the portfolio of our companies and had him rework the whole thing and color it and add visual effects and sort of make it into a full-blown teaser. And while I was working on that process, we were developing a script together based on this sort of tiny idea that had started in a single meeting. And from that came a really strong spec script that we developed together for several months. And what we then set up at the studio was sort of the package of the script and the trailer that were both developed concurrently. And he was very hesitant in the meeting to even show me this piece of material because it wasn't polished, it wasn't finished, it wasn't good. It was just random clips pulled off the internet that he had put together for himself as like almost like a mood board to draw upon. But that wound up being the source of a project that looks like it's going to shoot before the end of this year. So it's one example.
I got a story from my dad. Really simple. It was actually based off of me and my sister's relationship with our dad and our boyfriends. And he was, my dad is the only man in the house. Even the dog and cat were female. So we would bring home our boyfriends and he would latch on and take them to Home Depot and chop down trees and go fishing. And so that spawned a story, kind of a romantic comedy, between a dad and the ex-boyfriend of his daughter that he's trying to get to be his best friend.
Did you recognize the film, or did your dad sit you down and go, "Have I got a pitch for you?"
I was talking it out with my coworker. I was just telling him about my sister's boyfriend going ring shopping. I flew up to the Bay Area because he called and said, "Hey, I want to buy a ring for your sister. Can you come up?" "Sure, all right." And we were on set. We were shooting Colored Girls, and so I went back to Atlanta and was just telling my coworkers about what happened. And my senior VP said, "We should think about that." It was a little bit cryptic at the time. So over the next week, I thought, wow, there is a story there, and just started building and found a great writer, Jeff Morris, to write it, and he instantly sparked to the idea because he has daughters of his own. He knew exactly what it was. But then my dad's only request was, be sure Denzel plays me, and Halle Berry plays your mother.
I think for myself, the projects that have come across, that my company Imagine has produced, in general, they've usually been through individuals that I've known on a personal level somehow before we were working together. So, and when they brought projects in and had something that they want to do, I'll tend to push back a little bit at first. Like I'll be pretty critical of what they've presented. Because I want to see what they're interested in it, and maybe it needs too much or maybe it doesn't, but I really, what I want is to just see that sort of spark in them, and once that's there, if that's there, then I feel like I'm very happy to move forward because I want to help them realize that vision.
Probably the most unusual project that I worked on came about, and also we'll touch upon the last question of putting together a producing team. Ultimately we sold it to Fox as a sitcom, and I found the project, it was a book that was featured in my alumni magazine, books to be published, called How to Film Manly in a Minivan. And I immediately bought the book and then read it, and it was, what I saw in it was a perspective. It didn't have a plot, it was literally a how-to, like how to keep your baby from eating remote control, how to maintain your sanity by, when selling your Jaguar and getting a minivan, all of that. And so I optioned it, and I negotiated a deal. The book was repped by CAA, and then after the deal was done, I said to the literary agent, "Great, do you have any writers that you think will be good for this?" And he said, "Let me get back to you." He never got back to me. And I then had a difficult time finding a comedy writer. And I decided as like a last resort, I'm going to just cold call producers who made similar films. Initially I thought of it as a film. and the film RV had just come out with Robin Williams, and it had done really well at the box office. And so I looked to produce it, and it was Doug Wick. And so I literally cold called his office, and I had this like 30 seconds like speech in my head of what I was going to say to his assistant. And as soon as I said the title, she burst out laughing, and she said, all I can promise you is I'll tell Doug. And I don't know how he's going to respond. And sure enough, I got a call back the next day from one of his VPs saying that Doug wants to do this, but not as a feature, as a TV series. Are you into that? I was like, of course I am. It's a great idea. and then I got a call the next week that they showed it to CA, who loved the book and was going to package it. And all of a sudden we were in meetings with gigantic writers. And like I said, we sold it to Fox basically in the room. So my takeaway was keep your eyes open. You know, anywhere and everywhere you could find potentially great ideas.
I don't have a good story like that. The last 3 or 4 projects I've been involved with have been very different. The House that Jack Built was a script that was written 20 years ago by a writer-director named Joe Vasquez, who died in 1995 in a film called The Hangman of the Homeboys. It was kind of an important film, Latino film, and a producer who was working with him on House of Jack Built, and took him 20 years to get the film made. Eventually, the director that I worked with was attached like 10 years ago, and then after we made Pig together, which was done on a tiny, what I say micro budget, it's different than when Paramount says micro budget. Yeah, it's several zeros, but this was Pig was done with our money. We're not rich people, and then that actually got Jack made because they looked at Pig and said, "Oh wow, well, maybe we've been trying to make this for too much money over the last 20 years," and so and that was a situation with a lot of producers. A lot of them didn't do much. There's producers who like have their opinions, and then there's people that like actually do the work. And I've kind of learned that lesson because I've always just been the one person. But that was an interesting story where the writer didn't write the script, and he's a writer director, and he kind of rewrote the script or whatever. But yet on Pig, that was a script that we had finished making a film that was that the writer director had written. It was in the Sundance Lab. We just made that film, we were going to festivals, and we were on the plane, and he like pitched me a 1-sentence idea for the next thing that he was thinking about doing. And I was like, that's awesome, you know? And then it became the next trip that we took to the next festival, he had a treatment, and then he threw that treatment at me, and then I read, I think, the second version of the script, and from there, I don't have any versions of the script that we went back and forth. It was a very collaborative experience with the writer-director. This is someone that I've worked with twice before, so it's really, we work really well together, really enjoy that process. And so as a producer who wanted to be a director, it was kind of a great experience to be able to be that close to the material. And there were major changes in the material that I suggested, that were my ideas, that were kind of fun to have like kind of ownership over, but also just to be able to have that kind of vision with the director all the way through. I think it was really a great experience, and if you can, a lot of producers obviously, you mentioned you come up with the idea yourself, and then you're hiring people to basically see that idea. But this was kind of the next best thing, I guess, to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my answers are pretty boring as well, but I'll pivot off it, which is to say that this film we're shooting in the fall, which came through a friend. I was not looking for a script to do, and sent it to me just for feedback, and shoot, it's good, and so we got to make the movie. But the films that I've gotten also the sort of conventional boring route from an agency, amidst a stack of other stuff. And I think there are kind of 2 lessons in that. One is that, in fact, agencies do occasionally send you stuff that's, good for more than kindling. And 2 is that all the agencies, and I forget who mentioned it, somebody mentioned how the knee-jerk reaction in this business, people have a couple bad experiences and they assume that everybody is out to screw me. And yeah, there are some sort of scrupulous, not very good people in this business. And there are a lot more really, really good people who believe in the power of storytelling. And that's true the agencies do. And especially now where all of the agencies have their own independent film groups who are going out and and they're sort of trying to do two different things. They're trying to certainly service their clients and get passion projects and clients made. They're also trying to generate revenue for the agencies. But in general, I think those folks have a belief in the films that they get behind, because they're spending a lot of time on it too, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to sell it. And yes, there are different sets of equities behind someone who's looking at commercializing a film and someone who's looking at the sort of artistic merit of a film. One of the things that's interesting about the indie space is there's a lot more overlap. A big summer tentpole, Transformers 7. Transformers 7 is going to make money, I promise. It's going to make money, and I think it's going to make more money if it's good, but it will make money. Lots of movies, when you start getting into the sort of foreign MG and pre-sales and that whole world, there are movies that are, the Jean-Claude direct-to-video action movie, that movie's in the black before it gets released. But when you're talking about stuff that comes out of these festivals and these other movies, the trick to them, and we're all a little incentivized to believe in this, but I think there's a nice case of overlap where movies can be good. These indie movies can be very good and not sell, but very few of them will be really bad and sell. So there's a kind of overlap with the creative and commercial that's kind of nice. And so I think as people are trying to get films off the ground, go in with your eyes open, and there are things but don't be totally scared off of agencies, because there are times when they can be very effective when they do believe in you, they will go to bat for a film and they will get it made.
Can I just tell one story? I remember one story that is probably funny for you, which is the latest film that we're finishing up right now. It's about to come out. Is about a band that became fairly well known on the East Coast in the 80s, despite the fact that they didn't know how to play any instruments, they didn't really want to learn. But they had a really good PR machine, and so they would throw big parties, and mostly their job became, they got people to show up at their parties, and then their job became how to get themselves off stage without having to actually play. So they would just keep perpetuating that. So they would throw their parties at parks that were near residential neighborhoods or near hospitals or libraries where they get shut down for noise ordinances. And if that didn't work, they would throw out beers to the college crowd and then call the cops on themselves as loud underage drinking. So they try to get up on stage in all their regalia and have all the girls cheering, and then the cops would come and go, "Oh, hey, we're shut down." So this came to me because the lead singer called me, and he said, "Oh, I just saw this movie that you made called Papadopoulos, which was a documentary about a B-movie filmmaker that we did, who was trying to make a feature film in 3 days." And it was ridiculous. And he said, that movie's really funny. I said, "Well, thank you. I thought it was funny too." And he said, "So how much of that is true?" I said, "It's a documentary." Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, how much of it really happened? I don't understand what documentary means. He's like, "Yeah, well, anyway, we're making a documentary about my band." And so, and I should have known there what kind of a mess this was going to be. But they've been shooting stuff for a long time. So they said, I want to see, can you take this movie over and make it funny like that movie was? So I said, "Well, send me the stuff," because I couldn't figure out what to expect. And so they sent me this 3-hour cut that was horrible. But there was enough in there that I could see, and I could tell from talking to this guy that there was definitely a story here, and that was kind of the story I told you. But so he's like, I said, well, I said how much it was. And he's like, "Oh, it's all done. You just have to cut it together." So I called him back and I said, "Well, it's not done, but there is something there's something there. So if I can, but I would have to put it all together and do some real interviews and properly some things that are watchable. It's really a mess. But that was definitely the funniest way I've started.
I've completed my business plan, and I'm starting on my PPM, and I don't hear a lot of talk of those things, and I'm wondering how much of a benefit those things are to gaining investors or even an executive producer or another producer to come on board, given that I'm a new filmmaker and I'm trying to attract them.
But when you first said, "I just wrote my business plan and I'm doing a PPM," and you said $1 then he said, and I don't hear much about that. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, we don't really hear much about that.
You're more than 95% of
How many filmmakers have ever come to you with any sort of business approach to it? I got to think that for some of you, you know, it's got to be attractive that they've thought on the marketing side before they've even kind of gone down the creative side too.
Well, I'd like to see the plan first. To see where you're coming out. I mean, it's funny because this whole business plan thing is why I started Division Film School, because just the whole process of, you mentioned, your gapping, all this like stuff that I have to kind of learn now to make films where I can get paid to make a film is stuff that I've rejected for 20 years or whatever, and to be on panels and go, how can I do any of that stuff, and I can just go make my film, and so I mean, there's kind of, I think, you can make a film where you don't need any of that stuff, and then once you start getting up to a certain amount of money, and that doesn't have to be that high of an amount of money. I mean, $1,000, which is relatively small amount of money, but you're probably going to need a business plan. Sorry. So yours millions of dollars, something like that. I mean, obviously, you're going to need a business plan and a lot of other, things to get higher than that. I mean, if you're looking for like straight equity, and you've got some people in mind that are, wealthy people that might be interested in investing in something, whatever, then probably a business plan, a decent business plan, and a lot of other, passion, all that stuff might be enough. But if you're raising millions of dollars, it's going to, I mean, these people know better than I do, but then you're talking like, well, now we need to, vet our plan with distribution companies and bring on some kind of, foreign sales company that's going to do pre-sales and bank estimates and completion, all this like stuff that gets, really complicated. Or, go to a studio. And this is obviously not my area. This is why
Adam, you want to
tell
like
make
it as well?
Yes, this is exactly my area.
So I produce films for $100,000, $500,000, $5 million, and millions of dollars. And the budget, rarely do you actually need a business plan. That is generally the purpose of it, is to show private investors when you're looking for large equity contributions. And it's more so that their lawyers or their legal team need something that looks, corporate and presentable. More usual than that is that you just need a budget. And the budget will serve two purposes. One is to actually show you and figure out the financial roadmap to actually making your film. So when you're negotiating with agents, whether it's for an actor or for a DP, that you actually know what you're supposed to spend. The other purpose for a budget is when you go to meet with foreign sales agents, or when you go to meet with the completion bonds, the insurance companies, they all require a budget to engage with your film. Every film should have an insurance contract with an insurance company, even if it's a micro-budget film. It's because, God forbid, there's a fire, somebody gets sick, you need your insurance to cover you. And as part of their vetting process, if you go to Truman Van Dyke's website, they always ask for a film budget. So those are the two purposes of the budget. But it facilitates your filmmaking, and it also teaches you what your financial needs will be and where the money will be spent.
For those people that don't know it, do you want to tell them about your service again, what it's called?
Sure. So after I graduated from film school, one of the classes I took was film budgeting. And a lot of my classmates didn't really pay attention in class because they thought, oh, I'll be a writer, or I'll be a producer, I'll be a director, and I'll never have to budget a film. The studio will do that for me. I wanted to be an independent producer, and so I wanted to have the skills to budget for myself. And then after the class ended, a lot of my classmates would hire me to create budgets. And I saw, after doing many of these budgets, I intuitively grasped that there was quantitative relationships within each budget and this script. And so I set out and I created an algorithm-based matrix that essentially asks you 16 questions. And these were the questions that I always looked for in scripts when I was creating a budget for them. And you input the answers to these questions, and then it creates your budget immediately.
Seconds.
In a minute. And then you can always take that budget and show it to investors, show it to foreign sales agents, show it to insurance companies, and get your financing. Or when you're talking to agents, like I said. I used this budget to, when we were negotiating for the cinematographer on Torture, the agent asked me, how much do you have budgeted for this film? And this was in preparation for, we were going into meetings with Lawrence Fishburne, and we needed to secure a cinematographer because my brother and I didn't have the cachet or the experience of making big budget films. And so we thought a seasoned cinematographer would add that to our team. And so I had to have these answers before talking with her, because I knew she was going to ask me, how much do you have budgeted for the camera department? How much do you have budgeted for the cinematographer and for his equipment?
What's it called?
It's called quickfilmbudget.com.
I also think this is going to be something that's more and more important, especially for indie filmmakers, like maybe even the business plans, but certainly the budgets, because of these new legislation, the new legislation that's coming through, which is that it's kind of this weird thing where, everybody knows about Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but soon a lot of those kind of platforms, you'll essentially be able to go and offer investments in your film to people of a certain net worth. So if someone's worth a certain amount of money, or they earn more than a couple $100,000 a year, they will have an opportunity to spend a percentage of that income on independent film and get a break for that. And that's something that is totally new as part of this kind of jobs package, and that the president signed legislation for. And so coming into 2014, there'll be a lot more presentations to wealthy individuals of a more formal sense from indie filmmakers, and a lot more of these opportunities that, yes, you will be dealing most of the time with these people's attorneys or these people's accountants, but being able to show them this sort of a business approach to things as an indie filmmaker is really going to formalize the process, whereas before you were going to friends and family, pretty much, especially on short films, and then your extended community through these platforms like crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. Now there'll be a formal way to approach more seasoned investors and the people that represent those seasoned investors. So this stuff's going to, even though it might not be the most glamorous thing to talk about, this stuff's going to become very important over the next 18 months.
I'm curious, how did you write that business plan? Did you write it from scratch, or you took someone else's business plan and you kind of modified it to your...
My background is brand management and director of marketing in another industry, and I'm transitioning. So I just took the approach that it's a product, and this product has to make a profit. And I'm assuming the content's good. I like it. I think it's great. It's sort of on the cusp of the trend that's coming right now. So it was natural for me. This is what I have to do. I'm going to organize my thoughts, unless I do it. So I just did the PPM on the other hand.
Right. Sure.
That's a bit of a doer, but that is another PPM that dropped from somebody.
Do you want to say what that is? I mean, a lot of people won't know even what that is.
Well, it's for private equity, raising, personal private equity. So it's just, it shows them the plan, it shows them the budget, which they do have, could be done better, and you're going to go on your site to give it another do-over. And so it just details it out, what they would get sharing equity in the film, should they choose to, participate.
Yeah. Conscious of the time, I'm not sure how long this is supposed to run, but we've managed to be chatting for about an hour and a half. Stephanie, what's the sort of...
Yeah, you guys can, if there's any more audience questions, maybe one or two more, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, does anyone else
Maybe
want to
one final question?
Yeah, does anyone else want to shoot their hand up? Otherwise, I'll do a quick rundown on, it's not a distribution panel, so I'm not going to kind of go into that in a big way, but how many people here are shooting towards something other than theatrical distribution? Is anyone, is that their goal, like to go festival VOD and maybe not even consider theatrical anymore?
I think there's a question over there.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yeah, because there's about product placement. What do you feel about that? So like for a short and maybe the features and maybe what us know about. I thought of it just because I laid there artists, there's an easel, so there's actually gravity on it. Bring that up. Well, what is your feeling on that as far as the way it's funny and I approach that?
I'll answer both questions. With product placement, it's hard to rely on that as seed money or to really finance your budget. I think it's more ancillary, and that may fund catering perhaps or transpo. But product placement is really weird right now, and it's more about brand marketing and branded content. And so, if you're going to go that route, look at your concept, your script, and see what brands may work with that. On the feature side, it is a little bit harder. If it's a short and that can go online, then it may be an easier draw. With our distribution, yes, we are looking at digital, we're looking at television, and also just rethinking how international plays. And especially with Tyler's brand being very specific, the adage is black films don't sell overseas. So I have been a one-man band in my company, and over the past 5 years, I've gotten everybody in the band, and we hopefully will perform and not be just a PR band, reselling and licensing Tyler's titles overseas. So doing the Bollywood, Medea, whatever culturally specific that matronly figure is, looking at Brazil, looking at Korea, doing local language productions, and still having Tyler's name attached that will create the presence in these territories. Dad Friend, the project based off of my dad, took it out as a spec, didn't get picked up as a spec, but I got a random call from a French producer. He got it from WME and said, I want to make the movie. And so we just closed the deal for France and Germany. And even so, my dad's like, yeah, we're going to Paris. So there are other ways and other avenues that should definitely be considered. Theatrical is always the holy grail. That's what we want, is to see our name on the TV and on the big screen. But think about how those distribution models are changing, and I wholeheartedly believe that as soon as broadband changes and those the lines between personal computer and server change, then it's going to break down the walls of how film is getting into each home. And so as soon as an iTunes for movies comes out, then I think it's really going to change everything that we do. And it's really on 5 years from now, I think the distribution models are going to change. So stay on top of those trends. Don't think that just going through a studio or having a negative pickup or an acquisition by a studio is the end goal. There are so many other ways out there, and you can be on the forefront because you're more nimble than the big studio systems. They're behemoths that are lumbering along. See how you can go between everybody else's legs.
That's an interesting way to end.
The clip we popped into the screen. On product placement, I was saying there really shouldn't be a film made, especially on the narrative side, without some form of product placement. And I don't mean that in terms of revenue raising. I mean that in terms of there are so many different water companies, so many different, caterers. The smaller you are, the more local you have to go. But in terms of getting people on board, I think it's important for two reasons. One is it will save you money that you would otherwise be spending if you can get sandwiches catered by a local bakery, or if you can get water coming into you from, let's say, that Icelandic Glasso is looking to get more into film because you saw they threw a party for a filmmaker. Maybe approach them to provide the water for your set. You might have to have a truck parked in the background of the shop, but it might save you a couple of grand in the process of your week's long shoot. to have that done. So maybe don't think of it necessarily as a revenue raising, but maybe as a cost saving benefit. And the other thing is that if you engage your local community, if you're shooting local, if you engage that local community to do some of the catering and other things, then you're also increasing your in-built audience for the film once it is, especially on the short level and things like that, where you're trying to build awareness and community.
On the product placement thing, having done commercials and online advertising stuff for multiple different corporations, I've never tried to pursue product placement for a movie, but it seems to me that that's got to be a really difficult route to go because there's so many people that have to sign on. It's got to be a really long route, I would think. But I don't know. In terms of the distribution stuff, I agree, and I think it's dependent on per project. Like that film I mentioned, Papadopoulos, was a documentary about being movie filmmakers. So we didn't figure that would have a broad enough appeal to get a theatrical release, and not a lot of documentaries are playing theatrically anyway. But that was one where we knew we had a targeted audience that we could find, and so when it went up on iTunes, nothing really happened. But the day that it went up on Netflix, the message boards and bloggers just kind of exploded because that filmmaker that we were following he has a certain fan base, and so the people that like those B movies are finding a lot of those things on Netflix, and so there's a lot of reviewers that just wait for This Week in Netflix, our newly posted to Netflix, what comes up there, and they all picked it up and started talking about it, and it made a huge difference in our sales. The HBO film, that was the place that we wanted to take that from the beginning. That's a documentary about a pageant for disabled girls, which I know sounds terrible, but it's really good.
Got a name?
It's called Miss You Can Do It. And it was 2008's Miss USA, Iowa. Miss Iowa USA was the first year that they had a finalist who was disabled. She has cerebral palsy, and she went and competed in Las Vegas at the national level, didn't win her place, but came away from there feeling like she had such a profound experience that she wanted to encourage other children with disabilities to think bigger and just to think, maybe you can strive for something grander than what you have considered in the past. So she started this non-competitive pageant for disabled girls. And it could be disabled girls and women. It could be anyone from 5 to 25 years old can enter it with any disability. If you enter, you're in, and if you get in, you get on stage, and if you get on stage, you get an award. It was actually a movie that 2 weeks before I was like, why are we doing this? There's no drama. I don't even know where we're going to go. But it really is a beautiful movie. The trick about it, distribution-wise, is that it's not often that, two people sit down and say, like, well, if we're doing movies tonight, what would we like to see? And that's not what comes up. And a lot of times you might think that you have this, I'm well aware of the fact that people kind of get this image in their head, and it's not the right image for the film, but getting people to pay. Across the board, everybody who's watched it has given us really wonderful compliments and has really enjoyed it, but getting the people to show up in the seats is very difficult. And so for that reason, HBO is the perfect venue for us, because I think it would have been very hard to fill theater seats, but when HBO puts it out there, then they don't have to worry about getting their money back in any way. They just have to believe in it and support it, which they did. And so that was the perfect way for us to get it out there to the audience. I think it just depends on the process.
You want to ask why you're not?
I want to mention just, you kind of brought it up, nothing is completely the idea of crowdfunding, and just mention a story, a project that I was involved with earlier this year, that I was involved with last year that came out this year. I consult to individual filmmakers who have a script who want to make a film for they don't have much money, and these filmmakers came to me, and it was a terrific script. And actually, I thought, wow, I should just like waive my fee and just come on as a producer. And but anyway, I didn't. I made a little bit of money, whatever. And I consulted on they had no money at the time. They had zero money, and it was like, all right, you have zero money. Let's think about how we can make this for zero money, or for a little bit of money. But they said they were going to do a crowdfunding campaign. I had done one previously, so I consulted on that as well. And these are like serious go-getters who, work really hard, very smart. Two women that co-wrote the script, and one was the director, one was the producer, and they raised $81,000 and had a 700, I think it was like 700 backers, and they went from making $0 to $81,000. And so, without raising any money, without doing any kind of a business plan, obviously they had a plan, and that was a lot of this Kickstarter campaign. Made the film. I came back on the film actually officially, like kind of a post-production supervisor, and then kind of just consultant on whatever. Once they got into post, the film premiered at Tribeca this year. She won the Efron Award, which is a $25,000 award, and now they're starting to play at the festival. So it's an example of kind of starting with nothing and just spending. They spent some time prepping for this Kickstarter campaign, a 1 month Kickstarter, and then now they had the ability to make a film that was actually a really great film, and I think it will get them more work as well as this film getting out on its own. So I mean, it's just something to say about the power of both low cost technology and all these other kind of tricks of making it film with no money, with the ability to raise a little bit of money to be able to do some of the things that are harder to do for free. So cool. That movie is called Farrah Goes Bang.
So if you would like to,
Just a
quick question.
Something I was curious about, if anybody else in the panel does any private consulting for scripts or scripts development projects. If you guys are doing that. Or have a service.
I think you'll find that most people that bother to come out and give a talk and be on panels and things like that are willing to engage with the community at large. If there's someone in particular who's being talked about something that is most relevant to your project, then I highly recommend that you go up to them straight after this panel and just introduce yourself quickly. I always kind of say, just remember there's a difference between approaching and stalking, and in the same vein, there's a fine line between a panel and a hostage situation. So we should get this. It's bordering on both, I think. So if you would please help me thank Matt and Mark and Adam.